Okay, I'm here with my good friend Pedro. Pedro, you and I have known each other for a long time, and I really wanted you to come share your wisdom and knowledge with us regarding life practice balance. And you've gone through the whole spectrum of being in practice, going through the grind, and transition into a place where I think you're at inner peace, looking outward, and you wrote a great book, Urban Monk. It's I can't believe how mainstream it was. I didn't realize that I was searching some of your things. Going, wow, you were all over mainstream media, and you made a huge impact on the general public with that. And so, you remember being in practice and going through the grind and all of that stuff. So take us back. And also, the other key thing people may not know about you is you've produced a lot of movies and documentaries. You've interviewed, lots of healthcare practitioners. So you have like this perspective of being in actual clinical practice, seeing patients going through the grind, interviewing all different types of healthcare practitioners from all over the world, and also your own personal journey through Chinese medicine, meditation, Taoism, martial arts, and the true urban monk, right? So so start with practice and what made you, what did you realize in practice, what kind of things were really into burnout? Because I think as a group, the constant thing we're always trying to figure out is life balance, practice, how to not interfere with our personal demons and self-worth issues into practice, impacting our fee structure, impacting how much time we spend with patients, impacting how we spend time with their family. Those are all the challenges we have. And I guess it's an open book. So I
Yeah.
guess start with when you were in practice and tell
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. I guess nothing's changed since I've been in practice. The early days, I mean, I didn't have, a family, which, takes a lot of time, as you know. But, when I first came out, early 2000s, as an acupuncturist, it was really, go fight for yourself. There wasn't really a well-articulated industry where it's like, oh, well, these orthos refer to you here. This family practice is going to, they've been looking for an acupuncturist, right? We were still kind of outside allied health. And so I had to, hit the ground running, right? You do a lot of health fairs, you do a lot of, just a lot of outbound promotions when you first get in, the acupuncture profession. You're very, very much trained as a generalist. So, instead of niching down and being like, look, I'm the autoimmune guy, and, these are the kinds of cases I want to see, you hang a shingle and you say, look, I could help, I got an ankle sprain in room 2. I got, heart issues in room 3 and insomnia in room 4. And so, you pop in the clutch and you change channels a lot, trying to figure out, what you want to keep practicing in, right? What you get good at. And so the work-life balance at that point was, younger and in the grind, hustling, getting patients in the door, learning how to do the comms with their practitioners, their physicians, a lot of which just didn't care at the time. And so what I did, just to kind of go through the arc, is then I ended up starting a medical group. I hired PTs, MDs, DCs, psychologists. And so I had kind of like a 3 office that became a 12 office medical group. Just seeing, yeah, it was, yeah, that's why I lost my hair, man. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of stress, Blue Cross, Medicare, all of it. And, they decide they don't want to pay you. Now you got to go chase your money. And it became a much different grind, right? Where because, as a single practitioner, you work, but you eat what you kill. You go home, you don't have a tremendous amount of overhead. Now I have MAs and nurses and a lot of salaries and a lot of billing collections people, right? And you get to the point where I started to kind of move into like an admin role, right? Someone had to run the stuff. And so I got to see kind of the dark underbelly of kind of how medicine works and how cases are sent around and all that. And I was involved in a lot of very active promotional stuff, dealing with hospitals, and procuring cases and caseloads and all that. And so saw that side of the business, if you want to talk about it. And then I realized, look, I was on the side of the business where, because we took these insurance policies and because we had to kind of treat what we were allowed to treat, I had kind of veered off from what I was trained to do, which was prevent illness, right? Is to anticipate problems that are coming. There weren't diagnoses. I mean, there weren't diagnosis codes, frankly, for wellness, and there weren't CPT codes for the wellness modalities, really. at the time. And so I gradually shifted over into corporate wellness consulting, so that I could kind of stay in the lane that I wanted to stay in. And then, eventually started doing a lot of video and you find when you're talking about lifestyle, you repeat yourself a lot. So we started videoing it and using video as an agent for education, and also a way for me to go one to many. And I've seen, obviously seen a lot of successful medical practices at this point. I could tell you people who leverage media, I think are doing really well because, like you said, you want to go home and see your kids. Here's 12 videos I want you to watch until the next time I see you. Right? It really helps.
Okay, well, let's. There's a lot there. Let me kind of go back.
Yeah.
The three parts of this.
Yeah.
So you were at the point where you were basically having 12 different offices.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
And what was your monthly overhead?
Oof. We were, it was about $250,000 before I started getting top heavy, and then it started getting up to, it was close to about $500,000, and that's when I realized, a couple blips in payment, a couple blips in reimbursement, and you dry up pretty fast. Right. And so and we had, I had a lot of independent contractors at first. Then we started to kind of grow and hire on, and then you got W-2s, and that's when that's when you're sweating for everybody, right?
Right. And and the thought process at the time is that's what you're supposed to do, right? So you're very successful, so you got to bring in more people, you got to keep demand, you got to keep with patient demand, because there's a point where you go, I have all this demand, I'm going to get more people. There's a point you go, I'm going to just shut down new patients, and when you get really successful, you go one or the other route. And for you, you went gung ho, went and built probably a huge practice. I mean,
yeah. I don't know. Maybe it was young and arrogant, but also, it's like corporations are like biological systems. They want to procreate and grow,
yeah.
Right. And it was the natural conclusion to where we were at was, you start kind of rolling forward, and then you realize, wow, we have to bring up case value. So why don't we get our own nerve conduction machine? Why don't we get an MRI? And so the business model kind of begets needing to grow, because scale needs those types of efficiencies. And, before you know it, you're like, man, I don't even recognize my days anymore. Right. It becomes a very different kind of job.
You get caught up into it. Yeah.
Big one.
Wow.
Big one.
So at that point you're like, this isn't right. And then you had to slowly untangle this thing, right?
Yeah. I brought on a couple partners. I had an anesthesiologist that was a narcissist. I had, there's a couple of angels that show up on your path that kind of break things too, where you're like, man, I don't want to work with this guy. And you get to the point where you realize you're just hustling to feed your overhead. I mean, listen, I had a good lifestyle and all that, but it was too much stress for too little peace and too little return. Right. And so I wound it down, and opened, I basically moved to Newport Beach, where I had a couple opportunities with orthopedists that I was friendly with, and were like, please come down here. And I basically stopped taking insurance and doubled my rates, and it was great. Right. And I went back to just kind of the core practice of, just healing individuals, right?
So you went from a huge multidisciplinary, multiple clinics to just yourself in practice, just cash with a fee structure that was fair for you.
Yeah, it was fair, and it paid. And I was working a couple days a week while writing my first book, making my first film that you were in back in, 2010 or something. And, just kind of throttled back to regroup and be like, I felt unhealthy rendering healthcare, and that's not a win. Right. Yeah. And so, just kind of regrouped, and that was great. I could still be in that lifestyle. It was so easy. Right.
You're happy working 2 days a week, seeing patients, and then writing book the other time, and self-reflecting and growing.
Yeah.
Thoughts and everything. Okay.
Yeah. Those are the easiest years,
How many years was that?
2007 through 10, 11.
Okay.
So yeah, about 3-4 years.
So at that point, you said you could have done that forever. So you learned some things there. The lessons you learned what were they? First, let's talk about your fees. Let's talk about why you practice 2 days a week. How did you structure it? How did you communicate with patients? How did you set boundaries? Because this is the struggle where a lot of functional medicine practitioners are having is, especially once they get good and people want to find them, they're like, they got to figure out what to do.
Yeah.
And so what at that period of time you were in this zone and you were happy, practicing and writing, and you had time for yourself, and you were, what were the main lessons you learned? What can you share?
Yeah. I mean, the fees were, I think I was like 250 a new consult, 125 a visit, which, in today's dollars is nothing, but, back then it was decent.
Sure.
And, the customer base was, a lot of like corporate execs down in Orange County and, the people. I did start to feel after a certain point, because, you have these people that are kind of high mucka mucka and you're their guy, that, they would, the boundary issues were there. They text you at times that you shouldn't, so you don't text back, and you'd have to train them very well. It was like concierge-y. But, it's also like, as soon as you start getting into that client base, there's people that will make you feel like the help, right? Where you're like, come on, man, I'm your physician. I'm not, your personal assistant, or and so it was a little bit, the more white glovey it got, the more, the fee structure went up, the more kind of personality stuff you have to deal with, because you have your people that are your referral sources, and it's just, there's a lot of human stuff there.
Let me stop you right there for a second. So first of all, your fee structure. Now, you said you went and doubled your fee. Was that a shock to you when you first doubled your fee at that time?
Yeah, I mean, it was uncomfortable, right? It's, why am I worthy of this? Who am I to be able to do this?
Right.
Best move ever. I should have quadrupled
it. Why do you think practitioners have such a hard time with that? It's like right now we're facing inflation, prices are going up, and then if people, maybe don't raise their fees and they keep going to where they are. And what do you see? There's some things that I see, but I want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, in America in particular, healthcare's like people don't value healthcare. I think it also goes, I guess if you had a good salary in England, it's different math, but people expect healthcare to be covered by something. And so, I would have this argument with, like, my front desk, someone would show up with a, Hermes bag and argue about a, $10 copay for my physiatrist who went to school, forever. And I'd be like, come on, man, if you're not, interested in paying a copay, you need to get out of here. Right. Like, and people were just trained that way. But I realized it was also because if you're practicing commodity medicine, people will treat you like the clinic next door. And it really kind of illuminated the fact that I needed to be somebody. Right. And that's, when I moved into media, when I moved into the things that I did, it's not like, oh, I want to go see an acupuncturist. I want to see that guy. Right. And when you become that guy, then all of a sudden your fee structure is, you're in command. Right. Yeah. And, you don't want to gouge people, but you should charge what's fair. And if people aren't raising their rates because of inflation and all these things, that's fear-based thinking. Right. And I think that, seeing more people to make it up in volume is just terrible economics. Right. Your value per unit, your ability to generate enough to not hate your job, not resent your pay. Like I remember at one point I was like, my patients would come in and complain. I'd be like, I wish I got to lie down on a table right now. I'm exhausted. You know what I mean? You just start to resent them because you're just running this hamster wheel and you're tired. Now money buys you massages. Money helps that. And so I think having the fee structure conversation and adjusting for inflation and just bringing up the value of your offerings to feel like, you deserve it. There's a lot of, we get into the practice management stuff of, what is health worth to them, right? What are they getting back by, getting their brains to function? What are they getting back to being able to, ambulate and move around in their lives? It's priceless. But somehow, some actuarial dudes put pricing on it and set, fee structures on it, and we're all subjected to that. You just got to buck that system if you really want to kind of break and just set your own.
So what kind of internal messages would you listen to when you're trying to, like, at some point, I think every practitioner is going to have to figure out how to increase their fees over periods over their career, right? And how much of a jump do you make and what's reasonable? Like, you could have quadrupled your fees. I think a lot of people could double, triple their fees tomorrow and it still would impact their practice, but there's a point where they kind of feel uncomfortable. And where is it insecurity and self-worth? And when is it the right price or the right amount? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it all depends on, kind of where you live, cost of living, what the market can bear, and all the kind of, economics of, Tulsa being different than San Francisco, obviously. But the point, that you're making is valid is, look, you have to be able to do it. I think one of the ways I like that I've seen is, do slight incremental kind of, adjust for inflation increases that are reasonable for your existing patient base, so you don't have a mass exodus, but then just change your fee structure for new patients.
Right. That's a good way to do it.
Yeah.
Yep. And maybe start with your new patient exam fee. And then when the new patients come in, they have the new fee. And then the other ones would eventually work up into it or something. It gets hard for the staff to remember which fee is which, or right.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, we've done this where, you just kind of set them up as, the day you decide, call it D-Day, you kind of have your roster of legacy patients, right? And then your new kind of E&M code, consult fees just go up the next day, right? And then you can kind of leave existing patients at their old fees, and the new patients come in at the newer ones. It's, it's a little bureaucracy, it's a little admin, but boy, does it change your perspective when all of a sudden you have, a patient on some legacy fee that's giving you a hard time and is, pain in the ass or not showing up for, appointments. And then you realize people are paying twice as much to, get those spots, right? It starts to really teach you about your value and your self-worth too, right? You stop coming out of that pauper mentality.
So should you have a legacy fee? Because it seems like that was something that was pushing your buttons a little bit.
Yeah, no, I don't. I like the legacy fee. I like having the legacy fee, but then it's easier with the legacy fee to fire people when you realize that, hey, man, you're paying half of what all my other patients are paying, and you're twice the headache. It really gives you a better perspective to realize that you can choose your patients too, right? Versus just taking anyone who'll come in the door, right? Because I think a lot of people when they first start, they're just desperate to get busy, and that mentality, I think it drags on a little too long into someone's practice.
Right. That's a good point. So what do so you have these real discussions with your patients, right? You find that that's critical?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, cost of living goes up. You could, but again, the legacy people going up with inflation or, 3 to 5% a year, it's not too big of a bite. And it's fine. A lot of them couldn't afford it. A lot of them we put on, payment plans or stuff anyways. And then as you move up the new people, you just, I'm a busy doctor, and, it's hard to get in with someone who's going to listen to you. So, if you want the kind of care that you've been getting, you wouldn't be knocking on my door. So this is how much it costs.
Yeah. And do you think when you don't have your price adjusted to it, you personally feel is fair and it can sustain your living needs and practice expenses, you burn out? Yeah.
I mean, that's the recipe for burnout, right? Is, you run around on a hamster wheel all day and you're still sweating your bills or are exhausted or, resenting the patient who got to go to Maui and you didn't, right? Like you have to recharge, and money is a big, it's the currency of, energy in our economy.
And Pedram, if you don't, and if you did get to the point where you don't address this because maybe you personally have issues with it or whatever, and you start to resent your patients, I mean, that's going to destroy your practice.
100%.
Because you're going to have this negative energy with them, and then you're going to be short with them, and you're going to, if they do something wrong, you're going to not even knowingly, you're going to be overly aggressive. So it's just having that discussion like we're having right now. I think it's important for everyone to hear, because you do get to the point where you do get resentment. I think like a lot of the people that go to, the physicians that are stuck in a 2-minute, 3-minute patient appointment model, these poor physicians have no chance to hear or do anything. They have 3 minutes to the patient. That's the model they're in. And they have their families, and they got to work in that model, like in hospital setting, insurance setting. And of course, they get angry and resentful, and they don't see their patients get respond. And the patient goes in and goes, the guy was a total jerk. And part of it is because they're in an unhealthy environment for themselves. Because they didn't go to all these years of medical school and training to be an asshole. They were just they put in an environment where any human being would eventually crack. And then the patient is like, I hate going there, and they don't listen to me and do anything, but they're not choosing to do that. They're kind of in a model that's doing that. But as a private practitioner, most of us that practice functional medicine, we're in private practice. We have our own issues, but it's just, we got to make sure we don't have that resentment part of that develop. Right.
Yeah. And for me, the big kind of canary in the coal mine was I didn't have time to do my own Qigong. And so if you can't espouse the things that you're there to, teach, then you're a hypocrite, right? Like I was running thin, and I was, you could tell, there's only so much coffee you could drink in a day. You know what I mean? Like there's only so much you can kind of adjust for an imbalance, and then you have to address the fundamental imbalance. And the easy part of this equation is, if the fundamental imbalance is just unit economics and how you're structuring your business, then you just got to stop thinking you know everything and rethink your business, right? And your stress goes away, and you have more money, and you sit on a beach, and you count your blessings.
Yeah, and just it's obvious. No one that I know that got into healthcare wanted to do it because of making money, but money is a part of the factor of taking care of a person's own family and their staff and everyone involved. But it gets ignored, and then it creates resentment, then it creates problems, and then then it creates burnout, and everything goes the wrong way. So it's something that can't be ignored. So that was one of the main lessons you learned when you went there. Then the other thing you point out that you said I want to point out to is boundaries. You started setting boundaries. Like, I'm not responding to your text. I'm not I'm not your employee. I don't work for you. This is a collaboration we have together. So, and this is where, I've seen a lot of practitioners, really good friends of mine burn out because they don't set boundaries. So give us some tips, some things you learned about setting boundaries.
Yeah. Well, if you look at some of the archives of, the stories about Mother Teresa, it turns out she was an asshole. She was so busy caring for others that the people in her administration, her organization, everyone around her was like, she's the most volatile, angry person you could be around, because she had nothing left for herself. She was giving. And she was really unpleasant to be around unless you were under her care, right? Under the Mother Teresa, model. But I think that the challenges are many, obviously. Practitioners, first off, like if you're struggling to get to the gym, or, you feel like you're depleted in sleep, and you're not, taking care of yourself, it will translate 100% into all of these things that you talked about. But I think there's also like a cultural stigma and like kind of these viral mimetics about being a caregiver, where you're supposed to like bleed out of your heart and take care of people and be like, hey, I'm there for you. I'm a great doctor. Just text me anytime, and you just get to the point where you've misunderstood what a good boundary is. And you could render great quality of care, under, regular hours, and tell them to call the ER, or, pick up the phone in the morning, making yourself hyper available. And, for me, I just had this weekend. My wife was out of town. My daughter had a stomach flu. And even when she was sleeping, I couldn't sleep because I was the wall, right? Like there was always another shoe that was going to drop. My wife came home, I slept like a baby, because I wasn't expecting, drama. Like if you're the type of person who leaves your phone on because what if a patient's going to call you that night? How are you going to recover? How are you going to sleep? How are you going to reset yourself and go back? Now, look, if you're an ER physician, you drive in and you're doing the ER. If you're on call, then that's a different deal, right? But if you're just a functional medicine practitioner that's making yourself hyper available to everyone because you're a nice guy, what have you done for yourself lately?
Yeah. I remember throughout my career, we have different staff people come in and say, listen, I don't practice emergency medicine. Like I practice lifestyle, nutrition, functional medicine. I don't have major emergencies. Like someone has to get on the phone. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to stop everything you're doing and stop everything I'm doing with my own patients right at this time to jump on board. And it was like really having that connection there with them. And sometimes people just need to, if they have an emergency situation, they need to go to the emergency department and other things. But a lot of times it was just like unnecessary time if you jump on board and do these things. But there's also the balance of building a healthy relationship. And a lot of times I found just having a discussion, like I have to set boundaries because I have my own life, I have my own family. I have to maintain my health and function and mental fatigue so I can be there for when you were there for your appointment and other patients are there for their appointment. And these boundaries are important. So I definitely think a lot of practitioners don't have that boundary talk,
No. And I think, as you're saying this, what's coming to mind is it's also part of our brand, right? is we are the caring ones, right? Like you already went to the doctor that, you know, kicked you out after 2 minutes and you didn't feel heard. And it's such a relief to be with you, Dr. Karazian. You're listening, you're caring, you're hearing. And so they also start to build up the expectations of us, because now we're different than them. And then we then don't know where that starts and stops, right? Like, hey, yeah, yes, I gave you a 2-hour consult, but that doesn't mean you text me tonight. And so I think there's kind of a dotted line being the more kind of caring functional medicine type of practitioner, where it also kind of enables us to be, boundaryless, right? And so I think we need to kind of think about that in how we practice and just be very assertive with boundaries going forward. And look, that's also, I grew up on the West Coast, people are just very bad at saying no, right? Like we want to be liked. We want to be loved. And, saying no makes you feel like you just, dissed this person. Whereas, lovingly saying no because I'm lovingly saying yes to myself is a really good lesson. And I don't think any of us learn those in our, education. And so, and most of us learn it because we've already gotten burned out once, and, hopefully we could avoid a couple of those from people listening here.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for myself, I found like, if I go, hey, listen, if you send me an email and it's a quick question, I can respond. If it's longer, we're going to send an appointment. So think about how long it takes for me to respond to your email. And then also, secondly, I won't have time to check your emails every single day. So like, if you don't get an email for 3 days after you send it, don't get offended. I don't have that in my routine, in my schedule. So kind of lay those things ahead of time. Then with a new patient, I say, listen, have anyone else coming in afternoon? This is our time to go together, focused on you. And there'll be times when I have other patients and I'm focused on them. I'm not accessible. And then I have family life. And then let's have our structured set times arranged. Let's make sure that when we have those, we're totally focused on talking together, make a healthy environment for me to be my best and for you to make sure that you're getting the attention you need. And having that just simple discussion in the beginning can change everything. Did you do that? Do you do those types of discussions all the time, or did you wait for things to shit hit the fan, or what did you do?
Yeah, it would I would kind of feel out the personality. There's the type of personality that you'd be like, oh, this guy's going to be a problem, and I we need to have the talk now. Yeah. And there's other ones that, you kind of wait until they kind of toe over the line. And then you're like, okay, look, here, here's the deal. I got a life too. There's other models that I've played with over the years, which was kind of like the medical consultation model, where there's a code for a phone consultation. There's a code if you're gonna like ask me for my time, I'm gonna bill you for it, and it's gonna make you think twice for asking me for my time, right? And so it's like, hey, you want to schedule a phone consultation? That's fine, but my next available is on Tuesday, right? And so you set very kind of real kind of business structure boundaries around that as well. I know, like, you and different practitioners out there have kind of like a global fee model where it's like, pay me X amount and I'm just going to review all your charts and look at this. So I think sometimes people, in my experience, who have like pre-sold packages, or like, oh, here's, your 12K plan for the year, have a lot more problems with that than the people that are like a la carte fee for service. Cause then you're just like, look, I'm going to, if I got to text you back, I'm charging you for it, which is not necessarily the right move, but it's the energy I'm trying to convey, which is, my time ain't free.
Right. So the other thing, so you went in there, you found out fee structure that was fair. You had boundaries. The other thing you did was you only practiced 2 days a week.
That was when I realized I can just efficiently slam my schedule into 2 very focused, concentrated days, and understand that those are my work hard days. I don't have time to check my phone. I don't have time for anything. I just get a lunch and I go back, and I'm just sweating those 2 days. Now, granted, this was pre kids, which, life gets a little more expensive, but, and what I did is I kind of concentrated this. I remember I had a friend who was a chiropractor, and he had multiple offices, but he was always open his offices with like a front desk and only like 2 treatment rooms. And he would wait until he was filled to the gills out of those 2 rooms. And then he would, open the next and the next and the next, just so he can get the efficiency of the office down. So what I did is I got the efficiency of my schedule down to the point where I was slammed Tuesdays and Thursdays. And Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I was either writing my books or, going hiking or going, and I just got to this point where I was enjoying my life more than I was working my ass off. And it really showed on the days I was at the clinic. I was like bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, like, Mrs. Jones, great to see you. Let's, how's the elbow? And it's just like, wow, this guy's charged. Yeah, because I took time to charge. Right now, whether that 2 days becomes 3 or 4 days or whatever it is in people's life math, right? It was just an interesting exercise in time management and energy management that for me netted a lot of really interesting results. And it gave me the time to birth my first book and my first film. And, I needed my brain. And, being a busy practitioner, when you're in there, you're not focused on the email you're trying to write. You got the next chart in front of you, and you have to be, your undivided attention has to be on the person in front of you.
You're playing catch up all day. You're trying to make sure you don't.
Oof, yeah.
And I got to point out, you say this, but not everyone can do that, because you have to have high amount of brain function and an efficiency to do that. Yeah. So if practitioners do that and they go, it didn't work for me, everyone hated it. Yeah, because you end up being 3 hours behind because you booked too many people and you weren't able to timeline and the visit. So that's something that you can't do overnight. You have to kind of become more and more efficient with it and kind of work your way into. The other thing I found, tell me what you think about this. I found that half days were totally nonsense. There's no such thing as a half day, because people would schedule like till 12, they'd be there till 5. They think that it's really half day. It's not, and that would really be a wasted day. They might as well do a full day and then have another day off and try to do like half day or something.
Yeah, 100%. I think half days are complete farce. I think they're a waste of time. If you're going to show up, if I'm going to get up and shave my face, I'm going to see patients all day. You know what I mean? Like that. Like, I got to put on uncomfortable shoes, all of it. Like, I'm just going to see patients all day. But I think, the kind of the point behind the point there is boundaries also extend to time. So how do you do what you do by, how do you not cut people off in a rude fashion, but keep yourself on time? Yeah. And then how do you treat your practice as, like for me, it was like monastery. Like I was temple trained, Taoist monk. Right. And so in the martial arts, you can't afford to falter. So I wouldn't get out and then distract myself with looking at some, social media wasn't even a thing back then, but, just getting on a phone call, calling mom, whatever. I would literally I was like military style. I would come out, I would chart, I would go to the next room. And when I had a break, I would completely decompress, but I did not allow myself to get sloppy with time, because those were the days that went awry. And those are the days you're sticking around for 2.5 hours charting when everyone's gone home. Right. And you want to resent your job, keep doing that.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. So when it comes to like being on time, what are the, like, for some strategies that work for you? I know, like, for example, if I already know, if I look at a schedule, I see some patients, I'm like, oh, I'm going to fight to, let's say I have even a 40-minute appointment. I'm at 40 minutes to just see how they're doing. I'm going to fight for every minute, and I'm going to have to like start announcing, hey, we got about 5 minutes left. And I have to know that we got about 5 minutes left. These are things I want to cover. If you think we can't get through it in the next 5 minutes, let's make sure we can schedule something else. But I have a full schedule after you. And then sometimes see that little bit of initial, like, heads up makes all the difference. And I think when I don't do heads up and I just kind of wait to get to the end, hopefully they're done, it end up being over. And then like 2 or 3 of those 5 minutes over, you start to get way behind. And then,
well, and to your point, and this is a really like kind of key insight, is once you're behind, and I've got someone waiting in my waiting room who's now waited on me for 15 minutes, they feel completely justified making the guy behind them wait. And so it's a slippery slope of people saying, well, I paid my dues, this guy's late, it's fine. And so what I had to do is really address our culture of allowing anything to be late and not falling behind more than 5 minutes. Yeah. And so at first it was a very uncomfortable kind of bleeding edge area for me, because I felt like I was being rude. But I would respectfully interrupt people. And, I didn't go full dragnet, of just the facts, ma'am. Right. But I would just be like, listen, I really need to get to the bottom of this with you. So if you don't mind, let me drive, and, let's get this story out. But like, what about this? What about that? And it's like, I don't want to say talking over people, but at a certain point, you like someone's got to control the conversation. And the patients are very sing-songy. They're very, they're not linear in their thinking. Now, the loss there is there's once in a while just this magic that happens where they say something that you're like, holy crap, what was that? But that free form kind of, looser expression is, just, it's not time efficient. Yeah. And, I don't want to be the 2-minute doc, but I also don't want to be the therapist who sits there and listens for an hour. Like, this is a problem solution based practice, help me help you.
Yeah. And there's times you have to go over just because of the situation.
Sure.
And I find also, did you ever do this? Did you put little spots like an extra 20 minutes just to catch up time in your schedule?
Totally. You totally. Did?
Okay. Now, what'd you do with patients because now we're talking about running a really efficient schedule, so you can only work 2 days a week. And if you're only working 2 days a week and meeting overhead, then you have to be highly efficient and make sure there's no wasted time and spots. So what would you do with cancellations? Would you charge cancellations?
We would charge cancellations. Absolutely. You have to. It's like, listen, that was money in my bank that you just took away. And someone else really, who had, excruciating pain couldn't see me today. Yeah. And so, you got to train them to understand that, there's a price, right? And we would charge same day cancellations were same as showing up.
Right.
Right.
And also with cancellations, what about people that were late? So let's say they had a 35-minute, let's say they had a 30-minute consult with you or whatever. Let's say an hour consult or something, and they show up 35 minutes late. How would you handle that?
Sorry, we've already eaten 35 minutes of your time, so we'll get in whatever we can. And because you know our cancellation policy, you were paying me full price anyways. So let's get to work.
Right. You have your staff do this, right? Or you would do it.
Yeah, no, but if they'd come and like bitch to me about it, I would not just, talk to them about it. I would reinforce my staff and be like, how's this fair to us? How's this fair to the guy after you? Right. Yep. We can't do this. I understand there's traffic, but this is, back in the day, I'm like, this is LA. Like you have to understand that there's always going to be traffic. So account for it.
Yep. And that's, I think those are the, things that are really critical when it comes to having an efficient practice. Now, you can't have an efficient practice like that where you have cancellation fees that are strict and appointment fees that are strict if you as a clinician run behind.
That's it. It's a sloppy ethical thing. It's like asking my kid to tuck in his shirt when I look like a bum. You know what I mean? It's you have to walk the walk.
Yeah.
And if you do, then they understand you're running a tight ship and they respect it. Right. So be on time.
Be on time. Yep. And I think also a lot of practices fail because they can't do that.
Yeah.
Would you, because people don't want to wait forever for you. They want to, when they come in, they can come in earlier. So then you're going to be on time. You're going to go through it. And then also you got to be very careful not to have a 30-minute appointment and end up 15 minutes. Like you really have to adjust for those things and be aware of time. If you want your time respected and have an efficient timeline. Now, not having an efficient timeline is not for everyone. Some people literally can't do it. I've worked with a lot of friends and practitioners, they just can't do it. But if you can, then it gives you this freedom of being able to have these extra days during the week, or even an extra day during the week can make all the difference. You can have a 3-day or 4-day weekend because you become more efficient with your time.
Yeah. And what's more valuable to you in terms of like decompression or downtime, some time to thumb through TikTok or a whole day off to go sit on a beach and like catch your breath.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think people misjudge how their efficiency and their rest and recovery cycles need to be to live a better life. And so they won't tighten the screws and run a tight ship during their work days. And I think it's folly, that's personal opinion, obviously, but time management is energy management. It's life management. It's like you are budgeting the heartbeats you have left and how you want to spend them best.
Yeah. So how do you not cross the line of becoming insensitive and non-caring? And how did you do that?
That's a great question. And to me, it actually kind of went back to all my like Qigong yoga days, is to sit in my heart and come at them with love and just be 100% caring, look them in the eyes and be like, I'm here for you. This is the time we have allotted. Because I think as you start to flex your boundary muscle, at first you think you have to be a jerk, right? Because saying no doesn't feel right. And so I had to practice being better at drawing lines while staying loving, right? Having a smile on your face and being like, you know what, I wish we had time for that, but I got someone in the next room waiting for me, and that's not fair to them. So you know what, make it another appointment and let's talk about that next time, right? I can't look them in the eyes with a straight face in integrity and say that, though, if I started my appointment with them 20 minutes late.
Right.
Right. So you got to tighten it up.
Yeah. So this period of where you were really enjoying practice, 2 days a week, you figured out a fee structure that was fair. You had a very efficient office for 2 days a week. You learned how to set boundaries. What are some other important lessons you can share with that period of time where you had a really efficient, balanced practice?
Yeah. Create the wraparound experience. So I would, it took me a couple months on one of my 3 days a week to creating a suite of resources for new patients that felt very white glove and highbrow, like, hey, welcome to my practice. This is why we're here. This is why it's important to be on time. Here's some stretches. Here's some meditations. Here's, a resource on this. And then, being very adamant about giving them homework and having kind of checks and balances. And back then I had email stuff, and, it wasn't as efficient in the way we would check in on them in terms of what their lifestyle practice. Now I have apps, we have all sorts of glue, right? Yeah. Where you assign them what they do. I'm like, look, you could see me 1 day a week, 2 days a week. That's not going to fundamentally change your life unless you implement X, Y, and Z. And so although I only saw them 2 days a week, it was almost like my visits became accountability visits in a very real sense. So we would go over, what they did, what went right, what went wrong, where they dropped the ball, what we got to do to fix it, so that we can keep moving them in an upward spiral of better results and better lifestyle modification. And in that way, those efficiencies, it felt like I was with them a lot more often. And it also felt like the time they spent on me in the clinic was well worth their time. They were getting so much more than just, a guy who's like, hey, what's up? Tell me, the systems I created accountability, and it also created what felt like FaceTime through video and audio, where I was in their lives a lot more than I was.
So you would have videos on certain discussions you would routinely have in your practice and just make it available.
Totally.
Like a library, and you would just send them a link, or how would you do it?
Yeah, I would send them links. Now we have obviously the technology's gotten way better, but I would be like, okay, here's my thing about, the elimination diet. So I would give them an elimination diet, but I'd record a video telling them the do's and the don'ts and all of it, and then have them watch that, and then give them a resource. And then, basically they'd watch the video maybe 2-3 times. By the time they see you again, you're already their best friend. You've been in their face a few times, and they've been held, right? And, it's so easy to do now.
Right. I think that's kind of the future. And it's not something I built the whole library for, but it definitely seems like that's the place to go. There's certain discussions you keep having with the patient over and over again. For example, elimination provocation or something. You might as well tape it and then just make that available to them. And then you focus on the other stuff the rest of the time, because there's plenty of time to focus on.
That's it. And then if you just committed yourself to saying, I'm going to do 2 videos a week, and anything that I have to answer more than 3 times this week goes on my list. You just start creating a weighted order of, videos that, you are tired of talking about. And so you do it once, you do it right. Here's my vast archive. It's knowledge base, right? And then as you build a knowledge base, those are not just, valuable time savers for you. Those are assets for your practice.
Right. You can have your staff distribute. You can write send them this video, send them that video, and they can send it out.
That's it. That's it. I would throw it back in the day. I'd throw it in I think it was before Dropbox, but I just had a hard drive with all that stuff. At one point, I remember we'd give them a thumb drive, right, and just be like, here's your doggy bag, and just be like, here's all the information you need to know. But I've also done qigong videos and instructor. So I had a lot of stuff to wrap. Yeah. And give them here's your mind body stuff, here's your diet stuff, here's some exercise. But over time, I'd go to the local trainer and be like, hey, I need you to record a basic upper cross, lower cross stretching routine for all my back pain patients. Here's $250, or here, I'll send you any referrals. People are happy to do that stuff.
Right. Yeah, I think that's the future of practice is getting these educational resources done. It's no longer the handout you give them in their pamphlet. It's like this video that explains things well for them. So the other thing that I think I really need some input from you as an expert is, a lot of people will develop the skills to be a good clinician, let's say a good functional medicine practitioner in our community, but doesn't necessarily mean that they have their practice built. And especially those that are new, it's like people have to find you. And there's a certain amount of number of patients you have to see before the referral source kicks in. And there's that gap between you've learned some skills, you're ready to help people, but you haven't really got to the level where your practice is referring everyone into you. And that could take years. It's not going to happen to people in 2 weeks. So, and the people that have the biggest practices have some kind of outlet, whether they wrote a small book or had some YouTube videos or did something. And, you're kind of you're basically a media expert and have all that background behind you. So what kind of advice can you give people that are, they're in that transition of not seeing enough patients where the referrals just keep happening and they're, struggling to get the word out to people. This is what they do because people are looking for them. There's no shortage of people looking for trained functional medicine people. They should know how to find it.
Yeah. A couple things that come to mind. One is one of the most amazing ways I learned to do this back in the day, and it's still relevant to this day, is if I'm not busy, then I should be busy trying to get busy, right? And so what does that look like? You can't just sit there and meditate and, have them come to you like a honeypot, like they don't know you exist. So what I would do is I would, around my offices, get like a 10 mile radius of all the major corporations, and then go talk to the HR people and be like, hey, what are the problems that you guys are having? And be like, okay, you know what? I need to do like a, work-life balance lecture for these guys or a sleep lecture for these guys. And then I'd volunteer to, they'd set it up, a month, 2 months from now, I'd go in and do a lecture on whatever the topic was that they were struggling with. There'd be like 50 people in a room and I'd bring, my front desk person to sit in the back. And at the end, I would just say, hey, if you guys want to do a, consultation, depending on the business model, I've agreed to do free consultations for your people here. Or if you want to just book a consultation, there's some politics there, but I would get 10, 12 new patients out of every lecture. I do 2-3 lectures a month. And eventually, that practice was full. I'd go to the next practice and do it again. Right. And just geolocate and figure it out. That's the brick and mortar way to do it. Right. Yeah. The media way to do it is, it's a little more elaborate, but we'll get into it, is Google's already telling you what people are looking for. Right. So if you could geolocate the search in your area and then just start to say, okay, what people, this guy's, what are the words that people are using to search for, how do I fix my migraine headache? Right. And then you start to figure out in your area what people are searching for. And then you start to create media with the right keywords and on that subject matter and put those videos on YouTube and index it on YouTube. That's one way to start getting some organic, but then you could also use that media, especially on YouTube or Facebook, to then target the demographics that you like within your 10 mile radius. And just keep showing your videos. And then, and then there's an ascension model, right? It's like, figure out your 5 or 6 best videos that are getting the best views. Once you start targeting people in the area, it's, pennies per view. And then you create a retargeting audience of say, listen, I want to create a custom audience of anyone who's watched more than 75% of this video or 50% of 5 of my videos. And you're like, okay, these people are watching my face. They know who I am. And then those are the people that you send advertising to, and you target that audience and say, hey, it's Dr. Shojai. I'm in your town and I'm doing the special thing, right? But you got to know where the fish are biting. And then you got to know, how to intercept their query with the solution that they're actually looking for, right? And that solution in a functional medicine paradigm is, listen, if you're tired, example, obviously, right? But if you're tired of, taking Advils or Imitrex for your headaches and you want to get to the root of this and you don't want to live the rest of your life, dealing with migraines and taking pills, There's a better way. Let me introduce you to my functional medicine modalities of figuring it out. Let's, we do this testing, we do this, we do that. But the goal is to figure out what's wrong with you and make it go away. And then you put up a couple testimonials of people who look just like them.
Right.
And then the phone rings, right? Like, I mean, it's just marketing 101, but I think most practitioners don't know what the heck they're doing. And so they just sit there and pray, right?
Even if lectures of the most common things people have, and someone says, "Hey, my friend has infertility," go, "Oh, I have a little video on that. Why don't you share this with them?" And then
send it to them. Yeah, send it to them.
Because there's a big step between someone telling you and then actually pick up the phone and going there. And sometimes when someone watches a video of a person explaining something, they just connect and go, "That person seems like someone I can work with, and I can connect with them, and they seem to understand it, and they can do that." But there's got to be those little tools that people use, right? Just knowing something and sitting in a room by itself doesn't do anything. You've got to have resources for people to know where you're at.
It's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable. It's, admittedly, I've been around a lot of practitioners. That's not what you went to school for. It doesn't feel like, and like a lot of people are just not comfortable with self-promotion. I don't like to, I don't even call it self-promotion. I call it education.
Yeah.
Just go talk about the things that will help people. One of the biggest problems we have in my company is it's a quality problem, but it's still a problem, is people are like, "No, I want to see Dr. Shojai." I'm like, "I haven't seen patients in years," but they see me on video and they're like, "No, that's the guy. I trust him." Why? Because I was the person that conveyed the message in a way that they were able to hear. Yeah. So that should be everyone on this call, right? You should have your own archive of videos.
Yep. And if you really think about everything we talked about balance and lifestyle, everything we talked about is being uncomfortable, like raising your fees to the point it's uncomfortable, having that discussion, setting boundaries, that's uncomfortable. Having patients have a cancellation policy be swollen, that's uncomfortable, right? Having a patient only have so much time in an appointment and have that discussion with them, that's uncomfortable. And that's what you need to be successful, right? To make educational videos, to let people know what you do, that's uncomfortable. So it's like people are like, "Hey, my practice, I just can't get it going." It's like, because you're too comfortable, like, or my practice is failing, you're uncomfortable, or you're burnt out. And a lot of the things that cause people to be burnt out is because they don't actually put themselves in a state of being uncomfortable. But uncomfortable is growth. Uncomfortable is what you have to be successful, right? If you're comfortable, there's no way you can grow. There's no way you can develop a practice. No way you can be successful. You have to be okay with this is going to be uncomfortable. That's part of the process, but that's what we have to do, right? Amen. And that's the difference. Because
listen, that's music to my ears. I mean, I think your business needs a hormetic stressor just as much as your body does, right? And for me, I come from Kung Fu, the literal translation of Kung Fu. There's two ways to translate it. One is work hard. The other is eat bitter, right? Both of which make you better at Kung Fu, both of which make you more resilient and make you grow in a way that is, adaptive, right? And so if you're not willing to face discomfort, then you're going to get more of the same, right? You're going to be stuck exactly where you're at.
Yeah. Well, I always end these, Pedram, with saying, what advice would you give to new functional medicine practitioners? And what advice would you give to really advanced functional medicine practitioners? So,
yeah. New ones, don't worry. You already know more than you think you know, right? Because, new ones all have imposter syndrome. And it's like, well, I'm not Mark Hyman, and that's just, it keeps a lot of people from being able to practice the way they should. You already know a lot more than like the guy down the street at Kaiser who doesn't even have time to talk to him. So just practice and you'll just keep going and getting better. Existing kind of elder statesmen that have been in functional medicine for a while. If you've had your head down as long as you've had, I don't think you understand kind of the state of affairs out there and how needed your services are on a macro level. And so take on apprentices, help other doctors come up and learn what you know, because there is no scarcity out there. It's actually a crisis, and there's not enough of us. There's not enough functional medicine docs out there to serve the needs of the society and humanity. So open your hand, right? Be forthcoming with your wisdom. Help the young guys up, and just give and give and give of yourself, and you'll realize that there's just 7 billion people that need this and growing.
Well, that's perfect. That was such a nice pleasure to see you and talk to you again, Pedram. It's been a while. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with our group, and hopefully we'll get to see each other soon.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been a while. I miss you. Good to see you.
Too.